Hi, and welcome to the second video tutorial for this class. Again, I am Emily. I am the User Services Librarian at VCSU, and I help with finding sources and doing your research like we talked about in the last video, but I also help with citation. I love citation, so if ever you have any questions about citation, please come and ask me. And let's get started focusing on APA 7. So again, before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about where you can find help at the library. Library Reference Desk is going to be your best place to go for finding information and getting that help. That's where you can pretty much always find me. But you can also go to the Library Reference Desk Teams group and get help that way and video chat with me. And then the library website is also a good place to go for information on citing your sources. We have a whole research guide that I'll highlight at the end of this video. They can help with APA and all the other styles as well. So let's get into APA citation. So APA citation is a style that is very commonly used in academic settings. It is most common in sciences and in social sciences and things like that, in courses like that. And so it is something that you're going to be encountering a lot if you are in those types of classes. Before we get into actually how to cite an APA, I just want to say one thing about citation generators. So citation generators are those websites that you can go onto where it will cite the information for you. You'll just punch in the URL or a bit of information and it'll create the citation for you. So I would urge you not to use those generators. Main reason being that often the citations that they create are wrong. And you're gonna be much better at creating your citations and understanding citations if you just make them yourself, because then you know that it's right the first time. You don't have to go through it and edit it and change the citation at all. An example of why it's not good to use citation generators is in October of 2019, I believe, APA style changed, and it changed quite dramatically. And it took months and months for citation generators to get up to date, and even some that I've encountered are still not up to date. So when using citation generators, you're going to have to be really careful, and I would urge you not to use them. I tell students to think of me as your own citation generator. I'm more than happy to look over your citations and go over them with you. So if you do have any questions about citations, come to see me. Don't go see citation generators, please. So here on the screen are the main elements of an APA citation. These are also the main elements of citations of every style. And most of them are very self-explanatory. So you have things like author, publisher, publication date, URL. But I do want to highlight a couple things from this list here. So article title and journal title. Think of that as article title and magazine title. So journal title would be like National Geographic. Article title would be the article is published within National Geographic. And so that's something that you want to make sure you know the difference between when creating your citations. Volume and issue is another thing that I want to highlight. So volume speaks to the amount of years that journal has been publishing, and issue speaks to how many times it's published in a single year. So some of these things like article title, journal title, volume, and issue are only relevant to journal articles, and you don't have to use them when citing books and things like that. But you want to make sure you know what the difference is between those things. And then lastly, I want to talk briefly about page range. So when it says page range, you want to include the page range of the entire article or the entire chapter you're citing. You don't want to just include the page range for the one page that you quoted from. And so that's something that you want to keep in mind when creating the citations that include page ranges. So let's get into a couple of the actual citations. So Yeah, again, so in APA, there's a couple things that I want to talk a bit about before we jump into the actual citations. First is authors. So specific to APA, you never want to put the full first name of an author. So you want to put the last name, comma, and then their first initial. Or if they have a middle name listed as well, you could put first initial dot middle initial. So if their name was John, first name John, middle name Alexander, last name Smith, it would be Smith, comma, J.A. So John.Alexander. So that's something that you want to make sure you never do, is put their full first name in a citation. And then once we get into the citations, I'll show you what this actually looks like. But with titles, you only want to capitalize the first word and then any other word that you would capitalize in a typical sentence. Often those are just nouns. So if the word United States is in the title, you want that capitalized. Or if someone's name is in the title, you want that capitalized. But otherwise, lowercase for everything except for that first word. And then again, like I mentioned, page numbers. Include the whole page range, not just the one that you quoted from. So now let's jump into some actual citations, the fun stuff. So the easiest type of citation to create in APA, I would argue, is a book. So this is what that's going to look like. So you have, again, like I mentioned, author's last name, comma, first initial. Then you have the year of publication. Following that, you have the title of the books. Now, the title of the books you want to be in italics. And then following that, you have the publisher. So as you can see in the title, Alexander the Great, the G in great is capitalized because that's his title and his name. But life and legend, lowercase, because that's not something you would normally capitalize in a sentence. So books are very easy to create the citations for. I would say that they're the easiest, but we're going to get into some more tricky ones. This presentation only goes over the common types of citations, but there's so many other types of citations you might be creating. So if you do have questions that aren't covered in this video, just come and see me or send me an email and I can help out with that. So the next citation that we are going to be talking about is a scholarly article. So this is what we talked about finding in the last video, those articles in the databases. This is how you're going to cite those articles. So in this case, we have author's last name, first name, first initial, middle initial, then the year. So that's same with the book, but then it gets a bit more tricky. So before you list the name of the journal that it was published in, you want to list the name of the article. So in this case, Human Rights in Psychology, Codes of Conduct and Common Themes, all lowercase except for the first word and the first word of the subtitle. Then in italics following that, you want the title of the journal that this was published in, similar to like how I was saying National Geographic would be the title of a journal. This was published in the Eurasian Journal of Anthropology. Following that, you want out of italics again, the volume and the issue. So that 9 is the volume, the 1 is the issue. And then you have the full page range. So not just, say I just was citing this and I just quoted from page 22. I want to include the full page range, not just that 22. And then at the very end, you want the DOI or the URL. I would recommend if you do have a DOI, include the DOI instead of the URL because it's much shorter and it takes up less space on your citation. So that's scholarly journal articles. And now this is kind of similar to scholarly journal articles, but a bit different. This is a chapter from a book. So if you are citing a book that has different chapters by different authors and the book as a whole has an editor, this is how you're going to cite it. If you're citing one book by a single author, just cite it regularly as a book, but if each chapter has a different author, this is the way you want to go about it. So you start with the author's name and the page number, author's name and the year. So in this case, it's the author of the chapter that you're citing, not the name of the editor that's on the front of the book, because that comes later. And then misinformation and science, that is the name of the chapter that we're citing. Following that, you want to put the word in, and then you want to put the names of the editors, usually listed on the cover of the book if it is an edited book. And then after the names of the editors, again, only first initials and then the full last name. You want to put in parentheses ED period if it's a single editor, EDS period if it's multiple editors. And then a comma, and then there in red is where you want to list the name of the book that the article or the chapter came from. And then following that, you do the page range of the chapter that you're citing and the chapter that you're using, a period, and then the publisher. So it's kind of like a combination between a scholarly article and a book citation. But if you have any questions about that, or when you should use this type of citation versus when you should use the regular book citation, just send me an email and I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. So last citation that I'm going to be talking about is a website. So when citing a website, be very careful when you use websites and when you don't use websites, because websites are one of those types of resources that have a time and a place to be used. They shouldn't always be used, and it's always good to use websites in combination with more scholarly resources. But if you are citing a website, it is pretty simple type of citation. So you have author's last name, initial, and then you have the date. So in the case of a website, often you'll have an actual month and day in addition to the year. So if you have that, include that here. You'll do the year, comma, and then the month and then the day. And then after that, you'll do the name of the web page that you're citing. And so that is the actual article on the website, the title of that. And then following that in italics, you'll have the name of the whole website. And so in this case, the name of the web page we were using was called Marketing Strategy. And then Investopedia was the name of the whole website. And then you have the URL at the end. In cases of the website, sometimes you may not have a specific author, and you can often use the name of the organization as the author. So for instance, if your citation comes from the website for the United Nations, you can often use United Nations in the organization as the author. Or if it comes from a government website, you could often use the government agency as the author instead if there is no author. But if there is an author, you want to include that. So after we talked about, these are how you want to do the full citation. So this comes at the very end of your paper. But then throughout your paper, you also need to use in-text citations. So in APA, which is different from other styles like MLA, you want to use the last name, comma, and then the year. Whereas in MLA, you would do last name, comma, and then the page numbers. If you are directly quoting something and not paraphrasing, you'll do last name, comma, year, comma, page number. But if you're just paraphrasing or taking the information and putting it into your own words, you don't have to do that. And so this is what it would look like for those types of citations. When you are citing in APA, depending on the number of authors that the source has, because sometimes you'll find a really great article, but it has 7 authors. So for the in-text citations, you want to include, if it's a single author, really simple, last name, comma, year. 2 authors, pretty simple still. Both last names with the and symbol in between, comma, year, and then if it's a direct quote, you would do page numbers after that. But if there are more than 2 authors, so 3 plus, you want to do the first author that's listed on the source, and then write ET space AL period, which is Latin for and others. And then you'll do the comma, year, comma, page number if there are page numbers from a direct quote. When you are doing that at all, if you have more than 2 authors, you want to make sure that the author that you list in the in-text citation is the first author that's listed on the source. So don't just pick one author from the list. Always list that first author, because that's usually the one that contributed most to the resource. So that is how you do in-text citation for multiple authors, but then there's also ways to do the full bibliography citation for multiple authors. So if it's a single author, really simple, last name followed by the first initials, like we talked about in the example citations we just covered. If it's two authors, you put last names and initials, and you separate the names with a comma and use the and symbol. So 3 to 20 authors, unfortunately, you have to list them all. So if you have 19 authors for your source, you do have to list all 19. Unfortunately, it takes up a lot of space, but that's what APA likes. You list them all and then put the and symbol before the last one. You separate them all by commas, and then again, list them in the order that they appear on the text. Don't put them in alphabetical order or anything like that. If you have 20 plus authors, you want to list the first 19 and then use an ellipsis in the place of the remaining authors, and then end with the final author listed. So there should never ever be more than 20 authors total listed on a citation in a bibliography, which is a lot. But sometimes, it's rare, but sometimes you do encounter those sources that do have quite a few authors, and that's definitely something that is unfortunate, but you gotta have to follow what APA asks. So this is an example on the screen of what an APA reference page actually looks like. So you want to have the title of the page will be titled References. So this comes at the very end of your paper, and it always starts a new page. Title References, you want it to be bolded and you want it to be centered. You want the citations to be listed in alphabetical order, and then also you want them to have a hanging indent. And so that basically means if you want the first line of the citation to be not indented, but all the others to be indented. That way you can find the author's names pretty easily in the citations. If you have any questions about how to do the hanging indent, just let me know and I can walk you through how to do that. It's pretty simple in Word. You just need to right click and go into some settings. So that is citation, APA citation, a brief introduction to APA citation because there's a lot to it. But again, if you do have any questions about APA citation, feel free to come and see me at the library or send me an email and I can help you out with all of that, all the fun stuff. But if you want to take a look at a website that is a good place to go for APA information, it's listed here on the screen. So we have a research guide all about citation. And on that page, we have quick reference guides and how to cite in APA and all the different all the different types of sources, because there's a lot of sources that I didn't cover today that you may find yourself citing. But then you can always send me a question in Teams or over chat. I have a lot of students who will just send me their bibliography and ask me to look that over, and I'm happy to do that as well. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to see me about citation, because I love citation and I'm happy to talk about citation. And that is this video.